Welcome to this tech tip provided by Imaginet Technologies. My name is Rusty Belcher and I'll be working through the tech tip with you today. In this tech tip, we're going to be taking a look at how to bring data from the SketchUp 3D warehouse into Inventor. For the past few weeks, I've been working on a project for an exhibit space designer. And I've noticed in the factory design utilities the lack of plants. Quite often when you go to an exhibit space, they've got, plants that, fill out the area. So I needed to make a few assets this week. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the assets I've created. I've done a couple of them already. Here's a bamboo plant. And I have to tell you, if you've ever tried to model a plant or a flower inside of Autodesk Inventor, you know how difficult or darn near impossible it is to do that. Well, in SketchUp, it's actually a lot easier to model lifelike plants. It's more of a sculpture-based environment. Here's another plant I downloaded from SketchUp, so I'll just go ahead and drop that into my space. And we'll put another one over here. Now, I've been bringing data from SketchUp into Inventor for about a year now, and this is my opportunity to share with you the process of how to do that. I'm going to jump over to the 3D warehouse. This is SketchUp's online location where you can download literally millions of models. And I happen to notice that on the very front page there is a model of some daffodils. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at that, and this tech tip's going to basically center on bringing this daffodil model from SketchUp over into Inventor. So the first thing you want to do when you're looking for SketchUp data to bring into Inventor, you certainly want to query the data, especially with plants. A lot of times in SketchUp they'll put a 2D representation of a plant up there and it'll spin with the camera automatically and it'll look like a tree, but it's not a real 3D tree or a real 3D plant. Well, here, as I pull up the preview, I can actually see these are 3D flowers, and this will work perfect for our demonstration. So I'm going to click the download tool, and I'm going to go with the 2015 models. I've read online that the process I'm about to share with you might not work if you're using some of the latest, greatest SketchUp models. So definitely go back in the history of the file and grab the older model types. So I'm going to bring in a 2015 SketchUp model. I'll go ahead and download that. So I've opened up 3D Studio Max for the next step in our process. I know a lot of people, a lot of Inventor users that don't even bother to install 3ds Max, whether they're part of the Factory Design Suite or the Product Design Collection, because they just don't typically utilize it. Well, one of the main features of 3ds Max is its ability to translate files from one type to another, and that's exactly what we're going to use it for in this process. I don't know 3ds Max very well, so forgive me if you are a 3ds Max expert and you know a better way to do this. Please let me know in the comments below. But I'm simply going to come in and import a model. I'm going to go out and grab my daffodils. So here's the SketchUp file I downloaded earlier. I'm going to bring those in. I'm just going to use the defaults for this process, so I'm not going to tweak anything. And here are the daffodils. Now, I'm immediately going to export those. So we're going to come into Export, and we are going to choose to export an OBJ. OBJ files have been utilized in Inventor for the past year, the 2018 release, maybe the 2017 release, I believe, but somewhere right in there, that's when OBJs became, basically Inventor started honoring mesh files. So I'm going to save these as daffodils, and I'm just going to save it as daffodils 2, just so you can see it. I've already gone through this process once. So we'll go ahead and save that. I'm going to export that information. So this is a lot of mesh data, but it will work inside of Inventor fairly well. Now, when this is done, I want to jump over to Inventor and immediately check it out. So inside of Inventor, I am going to open And let me see, I'm going to go to my workspace here, go to my asset development directory, and I'm going to open up an OBJ file. So right there, OBJ. So there's the Daffodils 2. Now, for this process, we want to know what the size of those daffodils were. Now, there's a quick way to find out if you click the Options button. When you click the Options button, you'll see the OBJ Import Options, and right here, you'll see the bounding box of the model that you're importing. So this is a great chance for you to see whether or not someone is modeling to scale or not. Now, if they're not to scale, you can take advantage of the bounding box dimensions. You can then go back into 3D Studio Max and do another export. So say, for instance, you wanted to scale this up or down. Well, if I go in and do another export, let me just pick Daffodils 2 again for just a moment. When I go to save it, you'll notice that there's a scale factor right here. So you can scale at the export option from 3ds Max. So if you know the bounding box values, you know what the scale factor should be to make it full scale, you can input the information right here. Now I'm going to cancel that and jump back over into Inventor, and I'll go ahead and basically open up the file. So here are my daffodils that came in just fine. You guys are watching this live as I'm doing it. One of the things I've noticed when I bring in the SketchUp data is that the colors are kind of muted at first. Also, when I bring in SketchUp data, quite often I don't have full access to all levels of the design. Think of it as if this was in a subassembly, sometimes I don't have access to all the subcomponents. You see the mesh file in the browser, and in this case I can expand it just fine, but sometimes when I expand it I don't get everything I would expect to get. Well, there's a nice way you can fix this, and we can do this right here inside of Inventor, and that is simply by exporting it here. So real quickly, I'm just gonna go through Save As, Save Copy As, and I'm gonna basically save a copy as an OBJ. So this is going to be Daffodils 2 underscore, and we'll save it here. All right. Now you'll notice I'm going to close the original, and I'm going to open up the new one. So there's Daffodils 2 underscore, and you'll notice how nice and clean they came in this time. So very nice. The fact that I can bring in these files, they're nice, and in this particular case, if you didn't have access to all the subcomponents of the original SketchUp model, you may have access to those things now. The colors look much nicer than they did before. Now what I want to do is basically add a flower pot to this so that I can quickly and easily use it in a downstream application. So I'm going to sketch on my ground plane here. I'm going to flip this over. And I'm going to draw, I think I'm going to draw a 10-inch circle, maybe an 8-inch circle. Let's extrude that up 1 inch. We'll go out about 15 degrees as far as our taper angle. And I want to shell that, so I'm just going to shell the top. 0.25. There we go. I'll then sketch on the bottom face, and we'll offset that edge just a little bit. And I'll extrude that downwards. So looking at the front view, I want to come down. That looks pretty good. There we go. So we've got our flower pot. Let me address some colors real quickly here. There's some colors that came in with the file. So let's take a look at the daffodil part. I'm just going to assign the selection of that color there. It looks pretty good. And I'm going to select this face. I want that to be a black color. So let me come down and give it a rubber black. I just like that color black. So there you go. So there is my modeled flower pot and my mesh daffodils that came from SketchUp's 3D warehouse. Now I'm just going to go up and save my file. And let's talk about what you can do now that you can display meshes nicely inside of Inventor. It's a couple of things you want to be aware of. Here's one. When you show up, when a mesh shows up in a drawing, it doesn't automatically show up by default. In some cases, you'll have to turn on the visibility of the mesh. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to start a new drawing. We'll go ahead and do a new drawing file. I'll just do a base view. And here you see that the plant meshes are showing up. That is because on the recovery options, I already have include mesh bodies. If you didn't have that turned on, the meshes, and by the way, it's off by default. If you didn't have this turned on, you wouldn't be able to see the meshes in your design. I'll go back over and make sure I've got my view set up the way I want it. And there you can see I've got a nice view of my plant. If I want to do the side view or the isometric view, it works very, very well. If you're a factory design utility user, I think you'll immediately see the benefit of being able to go to the SketchUp warehouse and utilize any of those models in your current factory layout. Just as an example of that, now that I have a flower pot with daffodils, I could go to my factory utilities and begin the process of publishing this as an asset. Now I've already published it at this point, so let me go back over to the assembly I started with this tech tip. Let's say, for instance, again, I needed some more plants in my design, so I can easily drag my asset out and find a spot here on top of the desk and place the flowers. Being able to utilize an online resource like the SketchUp warehouse is an incredibly important advance in the history of the factory design utilities. Here you can see that I've added a number of mesh assets that I've already imported, like the people in the background, the car. That's the old car from the ancient AutoCAD file that's been floating around since R13. Here's something neat. Here's a point cloud of a forklift with a mesh driver inside of it. So being able to go and utilize these is just a really important advance as far as asset development goes. If you have the factory design utilities and you'd like to try the meshes that I have already imported, when you get to the asset browser, simply type in mesh and you'll see a list of all the mesh assets I've published up to date. So just as to finish this up, I'll bring in the driver and we'll drop him off, and we will certainly scoot him over and we'll lift him up into the car. And let's go ahead and get him situated to drive it correctly. So just that easy to add a mesh asset that originated in the SketchUp 3D warehouse to our Inventor environment. I hope you've enjoyed this tech tip. I hope you get a chance to add meshes to the next Inventor model you're working on. Just remember to get your 3D Studio Max application installed prior to starting this process. Again, if you have any questions on the tech tip and the things we've covered, feel free to contact your Imaginext Technologies account manager or representative.